He lay motionless in the most luxurious hospital suite money could buy, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. To the world, Adrian Carter was a helpless patient, another tragedy after a mysterious private jet accident. But behind closed eyelids, the black billionaire tech CEO was wide awake, listening. What he overheard wasn't just betrayal, it was a conspiracy dripping with greed, hatred, and something far darker. And in that moment, he realized his enemies weren't strangers. They were family. The question wasn't if he'd survive, he already had. The question was, would he make it out alive once they knew he knew? Adrian Carter had built an empire from nothing, code by code, idea by idea. From a cramped apartment in Atlanta to the glass-walled headquarters of Carter Technologies. He had become one of the few black CEOs in the Fortune 500. His days were a blur of board meetings, global deals, and quiet moments designing the future of clean energy. But for all his power, Adrian was a man of simple routines. Morning coffee on the balcony, phone calls to his mother every Sunday, and flights on his private jet between business hubs. That jet had always been his sanctuary, a place where he could escape the noise. Until one evening, 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, it betrayed him. The explosion wasn't deafening. It was a muffled, sickening pop, followed by the shudder of engines dying. Hours later, he awoke in a pristine hospital room, his body weak, his mind racing. Everyone said it was an accident. But as Adrian lay in that bed, watching shadows shift across the ceiling, something gnawed at him. The looks exchanged in the hallways, the guarded whispers. They weren't the faces of relief that he'd survived. They were the faces of people waiting for him to die. Adrian Carter quickly learned that the most dangerous place to be wasn't in the wreckage of a sabotaged jet. It was in the bed where everyone thought he was too broken to move. The first day, he heard nothing but the hum of machines and the shuffle of nurses' shoes. The second day, whispers began to seep through the sterile air. His wife, Vanessa, spoke in clipped tones to someone he couldn't see. Just keep him under. The longer, the better. Her voice was calm, almost bored, like this was a routine business decision. By the third day, Adrian realized she wasn't alone in this. Marcus, his half-brother and CFO, visited daily, never once touching Adrian's hand, never once asking about his recovery. Instead, his words were about numbers, stock prices, and transition plans. Adrian's pulse quickened under the monitor as he pieced it together. They weren't praying for his health. They were planning for his absence. Then came the shift change that altered everything. A nurse named Leah, younger than most, with quick, watchful eyes, lingered by his bedside longer than necessary. She adjusted his but her gaze kept drifting toward the door, like she was afraid of being seen. That night, when the hallway fell silent, she leaned down and whispered, so soft it was barely breath, "I know you can hear me." Adrian's heart pounded. No one else knew. No one else believed. She went on. The sedation levels were far beyond medical necessity. His vitals were stable enough to begin rehab, yet the orders were clear: keep him heavily dosed, keep him silent. And the person signing those orders was the same doctor who handled the Carter family's corporate medical reviews, the one Vanessa had handpicked years ago. Racism had always been an undercurrent in Adrian's career. Quiet doubts about his competence. Deals questioned until a white counterpart approved them. The constant, unspoken pressure to prove he belonged. But this was something else. This wasn't just about greed. Leah had seen the security memos, the comments exchanged in encrypted emails. "We can't have him speaking at the Horizon launch. He'll make it all about his community." They weren't just trying to take his company. They were trying to silence the very mission he'd fought for, bringing affordable renewable energy to underserved neighborhoods, many of them black and brown. Leah promised to help, but she warned him. If they found out he was aware, they would end the coma permanently. Over the next days, she smuggled in small tools, a hidden audio recorder, a tablet disguised as a chart to document conversations. Every word, every plan, every racial slur muttered when they thought no one was listening. But each piece of evidence came with a cost. Cameras caught Leah lingering too long. Marcus began making surprise visits at night. And one evening, Adrian heard Vanessa's heels click into the room, pause by his bed, and then her voice, low, sharp, and certain. "It's time we finish this." It happened in the dead of night. Leah had just finished transferring the final audio files. Vanessa and Marcus discussing how to manage Adrian's legacy. When the door burst open, two security guards, men he recognized from corporate events, filled the room. Their eyes weren't those of hospital staff. They were there for something else. Behind them, Vanessa stepped in, immaculate as ever, her perfume cutting through the sterile air. "We can't wait any longer," she told the guards. "Do it quietly." Her words were smooth, but her meaning was sharp enough to slice through the dark. Adrian's heart hammered against the beeping monitor. He couldn't move yet, not fully, but he was no longer the silent victim she thought. Under the blanket, his fingers pressed the hidden recorder Leah had strapped to his wrist earlier. Every word was being captured. The guards moved closer, blocking the light. One pulled a syringe from his pocket. The label was stripped, but the amber liquid inside told its own story. Leah's breath hitched, but she didn't run. Instead, she stepped between the bed and the guards, her voice steady but shaking at the edges. "If you touch him, I swear." The guard shoved her aside. The needle rose. Adrian knew this was it, seconds before everything ended. In that instant, the monitors erupted in a high-pitched alarm. Dr. Lin burst in, flanked by two police officers Leah had called hours earlier, gambling on the hope they'd arrive in time. Flashlights swept the room, orders shouted. The syringe clattered to the floor. Vanessa's composure cracked, her voice breaking into a snarl. "You'll ruin everything." But as the officers closed in, Adrian forced his eyes open, meeting her gaze for the first time since the crash. His voice was ragged, but the words landed like a verdict. "No, you did." By morning, Vanessa, Marcus, and the corrupt doctor were in police custody, charged with attempted murder, corporate fraud, and conspiracy. The recordings Leah had gathered painted a picture so clear, so undeniable, that even the most loyal board members couldn't look away. For Adrian, the physical recovery was grueling, but the emotional weight was heavier. He had always known the quiet undercurrent of racism that followed him through boardrooms and investor meetings. The polite skepticism, the coded language, the subtle way his ideas were only valid when echoed by someone white. But this was racism weaponized, used to strip him not just of his company, but of his life's purpose. Months later, Adrian stood at the launch of the Horizon Project. Cameras flashed, reporters leaned forward, and he spoke not just of renewable energy, but of resilience, justice, and the dangers of underestimating a black man's resolve. His company would now dedicate a portion of its profits to dismantling the systemic barriers that kept so many communities from thriving. Leah stood in the crowd, a quiet reminder that courage often comes from the unlikeliest places. And though Adrian had survived, he knew countless others hadn't. Their stories ended in silence, their dreams buried under the weight of greed and prejudice. As the applause faded, he looked into the lenses of a dozen cameras and asked the question that had haunted him since the hospital. How many more lives have to be stolen in the shadows before we decide enough is enough? Because his story wasn't just about survival, it was a warning. And the next time, it might not end with a rescue. What did you think about Adrian's fight for justice? Do you believe stories like this happen more often than we realize? If this story moved you, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it so more people hear the truth.